Hello, my name is Ed Wyatt, and I'm a Senior Director of Communications at the World Wildlife Fund. I graduated from Baylor in 1984 with a degree in journalism and political science, and I served as editor-in-chief of the Lariat in my senior year. Most of my career was spent as a reporter, and I took a circuitous path to public relations. So I want to tell you a little about that path because I think it holds some lessons for those who may not be sure exactly what they want to do after college. After Baylor, I went to graduate school at Syracuse University, where I enrolled in a program in media administration, which was half in the business school and half in the Newhouse Communications School. I found that the graduate communications courses were largely a repeat of what I'd learned at Baylor, but I was fascinated by the business courses. I never set foot in Hankomer while I was at Baylor, but I found myself enthralled by the new subject matter and by reading the Wall Street Journal, which proved to me that there were rafts of great stories to tell about business. I switched to the business school at Syracuse and earned an MBA, and then I went to work as a financial reporter in New York City. I did that for 7 years at Dow Jones News Service and Barron's Magazine, and then I got an opportunity to move to the New York Times, where I remained a reporter for 20 years. I worked for the Times in New York, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C., covering a wide variety of beats. In New York, I covered business and finance, education, the rebuilding of the World Trade Center after 9/11, the publishing business. In Los Angeles, I covered the television industry, and in Washington, I covered telecommunications, antitrust, and regulatory policy. And I was also lucky enough to cover the Tour de France for 3 years in professional cycling. After 20 years at the Times, I decided to look for something new, for a couple of reasons. I had 2 daughters approaching college age, and frankly, I needed a boost in salary to pay tuition. But I was also dismayed by the role the internet had forged in daily journalism, turning even the New York Times into a wire service, where I would often file 4 or 5 versions of a story a day because of the constant need of the Times website for updated copy. After leaving journalism, I first joined a public affairs agency where I put together strategic communications plans for companies, trade associations, and foreign governments who needed help with their presence in Washington. And after 3 years of that, I had an opportunity to join the U.S. program of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, working on strategic communications and media relations for its education and economic mobility programs. After the Gates Foundation, I spent 2 years at Precision Strategies, a public affairs agency where I worked on nonprofit communications and progressive corporate campaigns around diversity and inclusion. But I found that working in an agency wasn't really what I wanted to do. Too often, clients didn't take the advice that was offered, and I wanted to be part of the decision-making rather than just an advisor. That's when an opportunity came along at the World Wildlife Fund, overseeing communications for the Markets Institute, which works on issues of food sustainability. Now, most people don't think about food as a cause for the World Wildlife Fund, but food production contributes 1/3 of all greenhouse gas emissions around the globe. Making food production more sustainable is a key to halting climate change, and the projects we're embarked on have a marked effect on both humans and wildlife. So I want to leave you a few tips and ideas that I think helped me along the way. The first is, don't settle, dream big. I think I never would have gotten to the New York Times if I had remained in Texas after college and started my journalism career in a small city with the hope of moving up in a few years to Houston or Dallas. If you have an idea where you want to go, take a step in that direction, even if you can't see exactly where the path will lead. The second is be curious and be aggressive. At the New York Times, I loved learning about new topics, diving into them and reading everything I could get my hands on, and then writing about them. When I had my first child, I developed an interest in where she was going to school, so I took an opening as an education reporter. After 9/11, I secured a spot covering the rebuilding of the World Trade Center site because I was the only one to volunteer to attend an 8 a.m. meeting of the governmental board that was overseeing the site. I'm also a cyclist, so in my spare time I proposed and wrote articles about professional cycling for the sports section. After a few years of doing that, the sports editors started coming to me to ask for articles on cycling. And a couple of years later, I was asked to travel to and cover the Tour de France, which I did for 3 years. Another tip is everyone deserves representation. Lawyers believe it, and I think public relations professionals should too. It can result in some uncomfortable moments, particularly when you work for an agency where you can't control what new client will walk in the door. I represented the government of Saudi Arabia in a bill in Congress that was supported by families of 9/11 victims. I didn't believe that the Saudis were right in opposing this bill, but I faithfully told their story to journalists and represented their interests. When representing the government of Ethiopia, my name and home address was published in papers circulated among the Ethiopian diaspora in Washington, D.C., and I at times feared for my safety. Demonstrators opposing the Ethiopian government convened outside our office, objecting to our work. But I was being paid to tell their story, so that's what I did. Finally, don't be in it just for the money. Public relations can be a lucrative field, but if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it ultimately won't be worth it. I was making a lot more money at a public relations agency than I'll make working for a nonprofit, but the work wasn't as satisfying. So do something that makes you feel like you're making a difference in the world. Never stop trying to learn new things and meet new people. That's because relationships are where you will get your best ideas, your best clients, and your best future job opportunities. So thank you for listening, and best of luck in your ventures. If you'd like to contact me, you can reach me by email at edwyattdc@gmail.com. Thank you, and go Bears.